Yeah, that one came out last September at TIFF, and it's called We Can't Make the Same Mistake Twice. I can't answer all the demands I'm getting. I'm very, very happy with the results, the reaction of people who watch the film. It has to do with a court case concerning our children at the reserve level to have equal rights in terms of health services. It took 9 years for this case to get into the courtroom, and it was heard at the Tribunal of Human Rights in Canada in Ottawa. And they won their case last January 2016. But not much is changing. They won, which is great. But the funds and the services seem to be the same. So it's going to go to court again at the end of March because the tribunal has ordered the government to do certain things which they are not really doing. So, by the time I finished the film at the board, I said it's 2 hours and 42 minutes. I knew what was going on in their minds. And but once they came to see the film, all the different filmmakers and producers that are there and all that, they just said to me, Alanis, that we don't feel the time because it took more than 150 years to ruin our people and to persecute them and not give them the same rights and all those things, and has to do with children. So I thought they can spend 2 hours and 42 minutes to watch what really happened. When you believe in something, and it's right and it's just, if you feel you want to do this, you can. It's not easy, but it's possible. And you have to be prepared, because the minute you're doing, especially, of course I'm talking now about documentary filmmaking. If you believe in something, and if you have the courage, nobody's going to stop you. But if you worry, oh my God, so-and-so is not going to like this film, or the government, or, if you start worrying about all the minds of all the other people that are against these projects anyway, then you're in trouble. You have to know that you can stand it if somebody hates you for it. That some will love you, some will hate you. And it's hard. You get criticized, they say things that are not true, and it's difficult. But what's important here is the result that you can get to make a better life. Especially in this case, I'm always fighting for children. It hurts when you're criticized and you feel the hateful feeling towards you. But at the end, I always think of the result, like if this can make it, if we can influence change, and if we can make a better place for people, children, or a different nation, it's worth it. If what you're doing is honest and is just, somehow it gets where it has to go. And you have to believe it. And if you believe it, then you do everything. Like, nobody can tell you differently. And that's what happened with most of the film I make. I don't make easy film. I don't know what that is like, For me, I always start with the word, with sound only. I go first with a tape recorder that's high quality. So it's to listen to whoever you think this person has a story to tell that I'm interested in, I want to hear it. If you want to hear it, really listen to it first before deciding how you're going to show this story. And it's always so fascinating and so exciting because every human being has a great story. And it's up to you to listen to it. If you think a A story is only interesting because it's been on TV or because it's been on the radio or that. You're making a fat mistake. Also, you develop a trust between you and this person, and you're learning. And then once you feel, I think I know what this story is, then you come with a crew, with a camera and all those things. But because you've used this high quality instrument before to register the voice, you can now use this later. Like when you're filming somebody in sync. This person you're talking about the same story that you have before with just sound. So this person is expressing itself on camera. So for the audience who sees the character, and then you go on, you're doing an interview, you go on to the story, and it branches out. You can go back to your first sound, where it was very moving, very emotional. First time this person has told many things, and the voice, the sound of the voice is very special. It will never be the same. And so you can, as you go into the cutting room, you start cutting all your images. You can go, and after you've identified the character on camera, this person is talking about the story, and you can branch out. The audience has seen who that person is. You can use the first voice to different images about what this person is talking about. And it's always a very special moment. I was raised on a reservation called Odanak. We had no electricity, no running water. We had an earth road. We had a well to get water. And every night, what do you think was happening? We had the oil lamps on, and adults talked to us, told us stories, and talk about history. Many of them, they talk about animals because they were all guides in the bush, and lots of stories about animals. And so if you had 5 or 6 kids listening to the story, there's no image. There's no movie here. You go by the sound. You hear the voice of the storyteller. So each one of us had a different story. Me, I'm hearing what he's saying, so my imagination gives me images. But the one next to me is different images. It's a different story. All this I tell you because for me, the word is more important than the image. It's the word that expresses what the story is, what it is like. The people, if you're working in documentary, people who are speaking, you must give the highest respect possible and really listen to what the person or the people are saying. What I do, first I start telephoning, trying to get an appointment with these people. Then I go to the community, and then I explain who I am. I'm lucky because everybody knows who I am, but and what I want to try to do. Like, I never know. Like, it might not work. It might not. But then I start doing interviews with one individual or two in the community. I might go to different people, but only one-to-one as much as possible. So I do my own sound, and I tape the people. As I told you before, it's got to be a broadcast quality tape recorder that could be good enough to go on the radio or on your film later on. And then I start, we get into a room, and it's also very important because, when you come with the camera, person automatically says, my hair, like right now when he's filming me, why do I look like hell here, So it's a distraction. So to just listen to the voice of that person, for me, is sacred. I want to hear. And I never hear anything boring. Everybody, every individual has something to say that, and the more you listen, the more intimate it becomes, and the more interesting it gets. And that develops a trust between two people. Often people reveal things that they've never done before, and because they feel comfortable and they feel listened to, and the person feels in confidence, is not afraid, like, don't feel, oh, they're gonna screw me or try to make me say something or twist my words. Once you develop this kind of trust, when you come back with other people, like a crew, they are prepared. This person is prepared and knows somebody else is coming. So you're not going to go and say, would you repeat what you told me how you did the other day? That's an insult. This is the reason that by the time you do your interview on camera, it's synced. You can switch later on to the same story, but you're showing other images with the first sound. It's magnificent. At the time, I was working on a different films, and I was driving my car, and I was going to work, and there was a shootout in Kanehsatake. I couldn't believe it, on the radio. So instead of going to the film board, I went to Oka. I got there, and there was a big blockade, and it was terrible. So I came back to the board, and I said, I'm changing my production. I'm going back there with the crew. I have to cover this. And it was difficult because, first of all, we didn't have a sound person. There was one sound person. He says, well, I don't like guns. If I go there, I see a gun, I leave. So I said, well, don't bother coming. So I did the sound for the first beginning of the first 2 weeks. And first we went and we were covering, all those cars that come, they want to support the Mohawks, and the police keep turning them, say, you can't come in, go away from here. So we were covering that. Anyway, it's a very long story on how I finally got in there to do the whole thing. It's a war in itself. It's also difficult to get permission to do things. The minute you're dealing with politics or rights or different races, different nationality, it's not going to be easy. You always have people who are blocking anything you want to do. So you have to say to yourself, if you decide to do this, you say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. No matter who I have to go and fight with or see, you have to keep, that's the core of your story. You've got to you aim at that. Because if you branch out and listen to everybody else, you're finished. So most people are against it. They've got all kinds of reasons. They're not going to give you money for it. They're not going to give you time for it. So you're on your own. You have to sell this idea to, could be any institution or foundation or whatever. But you've got to know what you're doing. And the responsibility, the highest responsibility of anything you do, is the director who holds it. The director is the one that has to do what the story is and how to tell a story. If you have a director that says, I don't know, je sais pas, you're in trouble. Because in most institution or foundation or whatever you're working with, there's rules and they don't necessarily function the same everywhere. And you have a director, you have a producer, you have then the crew. In the old days at the National Film Board of Canada, the producer had the last word. So let's say you come there, you have a story, you come from a different nation and you've lived the story, you know what the story is. The producer could say to you, if you're a director and don't know too well how to make this or what to say, you're in trouble. The director has to be strong and know what the story is and understand it and say, this is how I'm going to tell this story. And no, if the director's not sure and, maybe this, maybe that, surely the producer is going to take over. Which means that at the beginning of your story, if you have a story, could be a private one, could be about your family, could be about your nationality, could be about your country. If you're weak, it's tough. If you really know what the story is and you're going by that and nobody's going to change your story, so the crew that's working with you feels confidence because they say the director knows what she's doing. If you're not sure and you keep doubting, it's very bad for the crew. If you're not sure and you do all this shooting without having an aim or a core of the story, then you could come back at the end with not a story. So as a result, an editor or the producer is going to take over and say, okay, we're going to take this. This is the story, which has nothing to do with what you had in mind before.
I got it.
That was terrible. No, I managed to keep, I was very worried though, that they would come to the film board and confiscate. Because they went to channel 12, CBC, they confiscated from them. And it went to court, to Superior Court, and they lost their case. The judge said that when there's such a thing, like they call it War Measures Act, or that the police and the army is allowed to confiscate, and there's nothing you can do. And they did confiscate from CBC. CBC went to court and they lost their case. So in other words, let's say that there was something happening today, and because of their experience, of course, they would make it very difficult for journalists to get into these areas, or I don't know, it would be very difficult to cover the actual thing. And the army, again, or the police could confiscate what you have, and there's nothing you could do. I think, it's a long time ago, but I think we had more than 100 hours in 16. Yeah, and we had another 50 hours on video. And I ended up making 4 films on it. We were shooting 16, you know that. They called us dinosaurs because everybody else was shooting video, all the journalists. And when we shot everything on 16 until September. Then we were shooting 16 outside, and by then the cameraman had left me, and one cameraman had passed me a video camera. So I had the Niagara for the sound, and I was shooting the video, and I was so insecure because I'd never done that before. To work like that is not the best case scenario. It's hard. And, usually, like what I was describing to you and how I tape people before, in this case, couldn't do that. You're shooting as it happened. It's like a guerrilla filmmaking. So what I did, it lasted 78 days. After 78 days, I stayed there an extra 2 weeks, going backward, like what I usually do first. I did it at the end. Characters that we had filmed as it was happening, and I wanted to know more about them. I went to interview them like I do usually at the beginning. Now I was working backward. First of all, as a director, you gotta be a storyteller. First law. If you don't know how to tell a story, forget it. You're gonna be boring. Because you have a lot of material, and there's a lot of people involved. So you have to think, what's the story here? You're a witness. You know what happened. But whose words and voice is going to interpret to say what the story is so that the audience will understand? If you're just covering like this and you're just chopping here and there, it's not interesting. It always comes back to storytelling. It was covered, hundreds times what was happening in Kanehsatake. But people who were watching TV, it was on all the time, 24 hours a day, couldn't understand the root of this. Why did it happen? How did it, So it comes back to be able to use everybody's words and tell the story. So that even a child who's watching this know there's a story there, and this happened, and this is why, and then this, and then that. It's a lot of work, it's hard work, but it's possible. And if you know how to tell a story, you'll do it. I come from a tradition of storyteller. All the nations, we've been telling stories for thousands of years in many different forms. So it's very natural. It's part of your culture, your everyday life. When people would gather all together, the different nations, and maybe one nation, everybody was invited, let's say for a wedding or for a funeral. Isn't that awful to give these two things?